Good evening, Miss Putri, and I hope you are having a pleasant day. My name is Aqil bin Suhaimi, and in this presentation, I'll be doing an in-depth analysis on the statement made by Krishlin about the question of whether or not the requirement for formality restrict the autonomy of the landowner when it comes to dealing with landlord's property. The outline for this presentation will begin with an introduction to formality, followed by the body which will consist of the current position of formality in respect to land and the evaluation of the requirement, analysis, and finally a conclusion will wrap up the presentation. Without further ado, let's begin with the introduction. What is formality? Formality is an important legal requirement to the legal system. Christian, on the other hand, define formality as the necessity of putting matter of substance into a specific form in order to have a particular legal effect. The fact that there is a legal dispute about the requirement for something as fundamental as a contract for the sale of land, however, it is significant. Nevertheless, the statute of fraud was the first legal instrument to establish formalities into contractual agreement. In order for a transaction involving the transfer of land to be legitimate, certain standards were set. Moving forward, current position of formalities in relation to land. There will be a legal ramification for not complying with a statutory requirement. According to Christian, laymen are unaware with the formalities associated with dealing with land purchases. This is the reason why lay people seek the assistance of attorney, who may provide guidance on how to continue with the subject. They would be able to avoid being perpetually pressurized since they are well informed about their obligation and their decision outcome. The terms personal autonomy and moral autonomy refer, respectively, to take freedom to make decisions regarding the land without any influence from external factors, as well as incorporation of moral value into the process of making decisions regarding land-related matter. The autonomies include both of these aspects. Compliance with the formalities would be beneficial to the landowner since it will allow them to subsequently depend on terms simulated by the law to protect their right. In situations in which the requirements are not met, there will be no assurance of anything since the landowner would have lost their legal right to make a claim under law. Considering landowner would be unable to convert the land in the manner of their choosing, the imposition of statutory conformity of the proprietary contradict with their rights to personal autonomy. This is demonstrated in the instance of HSBC Trust Company Limited and Aqil, where, despite the majority of requirements being satisfied, the document was inconsistent as a deed. Even in Sharma and another and Simples Limited, the formal legitimacy criteria was not satisfied, and the court declared that the agreement to be null and invalid. This is in accordance with the Kirtland article, which contained that the formality requirement actually restrain landowners' freedom to manage the property. The contrary side of this issue, however, is also shown by the next section to the general rule. When formality requirements are not followed and do not entirely restrict the landowner's personal freedom, for instance, Section 54, Sub 2 of the Land of Property Act 1925 gives the landowner the option to grant a lease in line with a clause without the necessity for a deed. In rare circumstances, the court may exercise the discretion to protect justice by acting on the landowner's purpose, even when the formality standards are not followed, as demonstrated in Young and Lurchani. In order to support individual moral autonomy and portray their morals when the deeds or contract with regard to the property inform, landowners are urged to comply with the formality required. The formality requirements are also in accordance with the evidential function aspect. Thus, landowners are constantly encouraged to consistent their option prior making a choice regarding the property to guarantee that they are making the ideal choice. Because oral evidence may be easily disapproved, there are risks associated with relying on it. And additionally, the spoken word is not recognized by the uniform probate code, and therefore it is crucial that the agreement be in writing in order to demonstrate consistency and provide the specific proof needed to comply with formality standard. The Law of Property Miscellaneous Provision Act of 1989 that would create a presumption that the parties intended to be bound by the terms of the agreement specifies the need for the agreement to be in written form. The minority will be left treated unfairly by the legal requirement despite the fact that the formality requirement helps the majority of the community. Now, we'll be discussing on the evaluate formalities requirement. In legal use, formality is considered as a requirement for not just a habit or conviction, thus substantive issue must be codified to have legal effect. Firstly, the evidentiary function. The demand for evidentiary security can be fulfilled in a variety of ways, including required in a writing, attestation, or certification on notary. This is the most obvious purpose of a legal formality. It may be passionately fulfilled, which require a verbal elaboration of that promise in a way sufficiently formal to impress its content onto pacification and potential bystander. Second, the cautionary function. A formality may also serve as a check on inconsiderate behavior by serving as a formality. Numerous formalities require individuals to perform things in a specific way that is intended to be slightly more difficult. And however, one advantage of this additional effort is to inform individuals of the significance of the incoming transition. Formality allegedly also serves as a safeguard the party from undue influence or coercion by making it more difficult to get into transition. Formalities effectively make it more difficult to persuade individuals to engage in them, and therefore, according to Kirschley, formality that needs or lead to the intervention of legal specify may provide a beneficial protective effect. She argued that the existence of such a formality requirement may frequently result in the parties seeking legal counsel, in which case the authority would be able to detect and avoid the use of external pressure. Others have noted, however, that this should be taken with a grain of salt, as it is often impractical to expect a lawyer who only hired to guide a client through the legalities of a transition to also provide opinion on the appropriateness of engaging into the transition. To take reference, in Royal Bank of Scotland and Eldridge, Lord Nichols emphasizes the distinction between instructing a lawyer to obtain the wife's execution of the mortgage and instructing him to advise upon the nature and effect of the transition, thereby assuring that she enters into the transition without improper pressure or influence. Third one, the channeling function. More analysis of formality stop with the analysis just offer, although it lacks one of the most important function. These seals show a legal formality that have understated function. The seal assure a satisfying promise, memorial, and encourage consideration. It marks the enforceable promise and provide an external test of acceptability. Formality criteria can assure proper form use. This usually happens when the parties hire a lawyer, while this procedure can't force individuals to consult lawyer. It can encourage them in some situations instead. Moving forward, the treatment. Firstly, vulnerable. It is questionable whether vulnerable parties are truly safeguarded by regulation require written contract. It may be argued that written contracts are more significantly more likely to impose requirements on a party that the party did unaware of the agreement, as opposed to protect such individuals from unwanted contractual obligation. In this were not the case, there would have been no need for the unfair contract term directive, which recognized that written standard form contracts are especially likely to bind consumers to terms on which they were unaware. Second, injustice. Injustice is caused by penalizing non-compliance with formalities owing to the ignorance of formality requirement. Formalities may look fairly impossible in context of married partnership. Lord Honsett stated in Petit and Petit that the notion of a typical married couple spending the long winter hours working out agreement out of the property is absurd. While a couple relationship is still healthy, it is unfair to expect them to consider their property rights. Those who remain on the land continue to pay the mortgage and contribute with the purchase of home, but they are not particularly concerned with the land investment. It is unfair to demand someone who performs something that is impossible given circumstances. In this case, Section 11 and 9 of Will of the Act of 1837 will take effect where it allows an exception to the sailor and active duty military personnel to prepare informal will and allow signature by marks those unable to sign their names. To critically analyze everything above, it is important to recognize that the need to maintain certainty in land transition, as stated by formality requirement, is frequently in contradiction with the desire to leave individuals to their own bargains, particularly when failure to do so might result in severe consequences. It might be claimed that formality requirement limits the autonomy of landowner in managing their property. Nonetheless, it may be argued that this judgment is reasonable, given that the stress of certainty in land transition adores justice, at least for the society as a whole. However, formalities provide the landowner with a degree of independence, as they can do whatever they want with their own land. Nevertheless, it regulates the conduct of landowner. It prevents individuals from making agreement that meets their own requirement. Even if they attempt to circumvent the law, they are still obligated by equity requirement. For instance, equity would recognize the existence of equitable proprietary rights originated from a verbal agreement of a promise if the condition of proprietary estoppel or implicit trust are met. Section 2 of the Law of Property Miscellaneous Provision Act contains accepting formality requirement. After a period of uncertainty, referring to the case of Street and Mountford, has one shown that possession or non-possession is the most important factor in determining who has the right to control under common law. Those who have exclusive possession have a real interest in land. The Rent Acts give them some security of tenure and control over the rent. And those who don't have exclusive possession have only a personal contractual interest, and therefore they don't have security of tenure and can be kicked out for not paying the market rent. Our presentation has come to an end, and now we'll be covering the last part of the topic, the conclusion. To ensure that the landowner's autonomy rights are not violated, it is necessary to demonstrate that the potential disadvantage outweighs the potential benefit of the proposed development. Since the very definition of the word formality implies that the rule is that simply putting things into clear and organized manner result in the landowner having to face legal consequences, this does not mean that the consequence is a negative one. The word formality itself suggests that the rule, the absence of the formality, makes it impossible to provide certainty. There will be no limit there to be satisfied, and as a result, the landowner has lost the protection afforded to his right. On the other hand, formalities serve as a legal framework that protects against any ambiguities that may arise. In spite of the fact that formalities impose some obligation which can be extremely difficult for landowner, formality is only an instrument that is used to guarantee there is no ambiguity, and in conclusion, the landowner cannot avoid to lose formality. And like that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.